Carmen's life had been a series of quiet routines since the tragic loss of her daughter, Sophia. But one day, a visit to the cemetery took an unexpected turn when she encountered a young girl, Luz, crying at Sophia's grave. As Carmen reached out to comfort Luz, she was drawn into a mystery that would unravel the painful past and lead to shocking revelations. Together with a determined detective, Emilio, Carmen embarked on a journey to uncover the truth about her daughter's disappearance and the secrets buried with her. What they discovered not only brought justice but also opened the door to new beginnings, love, and hope for the future. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. As Carmen wandered through the solemn and still corridors of Monterrey Cemetery, her heart weighed heavily with sorrow. In one hand, she clutched a bouquet of delicate white flowers, and in the other, she held a worn and faded photograph, the edges frayed from years of tender handling. The wind whispered through the trees, echoing the silence that surrounded her. With each step, memories flooded her mind, each one more bittersweet than the last. When she finally reached the gravestone of her beloved daughter, Sophia, she lowered herself to her knees with great difficulty, her joints protesting the movement. The cold, unyielding stone beneath her fingertips sent a shiver down her spine as she placed the flowers and photo gently atop it. Another year had passed, but to Carmen, it felt as though time had stood still, trapping her in an endless loop of grief and longing. "My sweet Sophia," she whispered, her voice trembling as it broke the heavy silence. "It feels like only yesterday you were by my side, filling our home with your laughter, and light tears welled in her eyes as she traced Sophia's face in the photograph, the image barely capturing the vibrancy that had once been her daughter's essence." Every detail of Sophia's life played vividly in Carmen's mind, the mischievous grin that could brighten even the darkest of days, the warm embraces that once offered comfort, and the unbearable final goodbye that tore Carmen's world apart. Sofia Rivera had been a beacon of joy and creativity, her life filled with promise. At just 28, she was thriving in her career as a graphic designer, known not just for her artistic talent, but for the way she could light up a room with her presence. But that light was extinguished too soon. The car accident that claimed her life 3 years ago had been a brutal and unforeseen tragedy. Carmen could still recall the night she received the news, how her heart shattered upon hearing that her daughter's car had skidded off the road in the rain, crashing into a pole with such force that there was little left to identify. The words died instantly echoed in her mind, each syllable a dagger to her soul. The world had lost a bright star that night, and Carmen had lost her only child, her precious Sophia. In the years that followed, Carmen's life was defined by the void left by her daughter's absence. Sophia had been her everything, and without her, the world seemed colorless and void of meaning. Visits to Sophia's grave became a lifeline for Carmen, the only place where she felt close to her daughter, where she could speak to her as though she were still alive. But each visit also deepened her pain, reminding her that no amount of time could ever fill the emptiness in her heart. "They say time heals all wounds," she murmured to the tombstone, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. But the truth is, the pain only grows stronger with each passing year. "Did I fail you, my dear Sophia? Could I have somehow prevented this?" Guilt gnawed at her, twisting her insides as she poured out her soul to the cold stone that bore the words "beloved daughter." Suddenly, a sound broke through her reverie, a soft sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere nearby. Startled, Carmen looked around and noticed a small figure huddled close to another grave. A young girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, was crying her heart out, her tiny shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. "Mom," the girl whimpered, her voice thick with sorrow. "Why did you have to leave me? I miss you so much." The girl's words pierced Carmen's heart, stirring a maternal instinct that had never truly faded, despite her loss. Driven by concern, Carmen slowly rose and approached the girl, her steps careful and deliberate. "Hello, dear," she called out softly, her voice a gentle caress. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, her face wet with tears, her eyes red and puffy from crying. There was a deep sadness in those eyes, a sorrow that no child should ever have to bear. I always come here to visit my mom," the girl stammered, her voice trembling as she tried to make sense of her own emotions. "But the name on this grave, it says Sofia Rivera. That's not my mom's name." I'm so confused. The innocence and bewilderment in the girl's eyes struck Carmen like a physical blow, unraveling a mystery she had never anticipated encountering that day. Carmen felt a surge of protectiveness towards the little girl, whose confusion and grief mirrored her own in an almost eerie way. She sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. "We'll figure this out together, my dear," she reassured the girl, her voice firm with determination. She wrapped an arm around the child, offering her comfort and support. "What's your name, sweetie?" she asked gently, hoping to ease the girl's distress. "Luz," the girl replied, her voice softening as she wiped away her tears. "My name is Luz Martinez." Carmen nodded, her heart aching with empathy. She was determined to help Luz, not just to unravel the mystery of the name on the grave, but perhaps to find a sense of peace for herself as well. "Luz, my dear," she said softly, "tell me more about your mother." As she spoke, Carmen offered Luz a handkerchief, her kind eyes encouraging the girl to open up, to share the story that had brought her to this place of sorrow. In that moment, as the two of them sat together in the shadow of the gravestones, Carmen felt a shift in her heart. Perhaps, by helping this little girl, she might finally begin to heal the wounds that had festered in her soul for so long. Perhaps, in reaching out to Luz, she could find a way to reconnect with the love and light that Sofia had brought into her life, and maybe, just maybe, find the peace she so desperately sought. Luz wiped the tears from her cheeks, her eyes meeting Carmen's with a mix of hesitation and an overwhelming need to speak. "My mom, her name was Ana Martinez," Luz began, her voice trembling with emotion. "I remember her always smiling, singing lullabies to me. But she left when I was just 5 years old. They told me she got very sick and passed away, and that she's buried here." Each word seemed to weigh heavily on the young girl, her small frame barely holding the burden of such profound loss. As Luz spoke, a man approached them. Jorge, her father. His face was etched with the lines of sorrow and fatigue, a man who had spent years grappling with the unrelenting pain of his wife's death. "It's true," he said softly, his voice tinged with the frustration of a mystery unsolved. "I've brought Luz here so many times, trying to give her some comfort, to reassure her that her mother is at peace. But every time I was confused by the name on the tombstone. I always assumed it was some kind of bureaucratic error or a mix-up." His words carried the weight of his confusion, the helplessness of a man who had lost the love of his life and could not even find the solace of knowing where she truly rested. Jorge's gaze lingered on the tombstone, his eyes filled with a mixture of despair and yearning. "Ana was everything to us," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "When she died, our world collapsed. I never received any official documents about her burial, just vague assurances from the hospital and funeral home. When I saw the name Sofia Rivera on this grave, I didn't know what to think. We were drowning in grief. And I failed to question it as I should have." His voice broke under the strain of memories and the unresolved questions that had haunted him for years. Carmen listened intently, her heart aching for Jorge and Luz. She could feel their pain as if it were her own, the sting of losing a loved one, and the added torment of not knowing the truth. "Jorge," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I believe something has gone wrong here. And I'm determined to find out what it is, not just for Sofia, but for Ana and both of you." Her words were a promise, a pledge to uncover the truth buried beneath years of confusion and heartache. Jorge looked at Carmen, gratitude softening the anguish in his eyes. "Thank you, Carmen. It means the world to us that someone is willing to help." "Luz deserves to know where her mother is truly resting," he said, his hand gently resting on Luz's shoulder. Luz leaned into her father's touch, finding a sliver of comfort in his presence. Carmen's heart tightened as she witnessed their pain, knowing all too well the depth of the void that loss creates. No one, especially a child, should be left in such uncertainty. With a resolve that strengthened with each passing moment, Carmen spoke again. "We will find the answers. We need to look at the cemetery records. There has to be something that can explain this mix-up." The determination in her voice was unwavering, meant to instill courage in Luz, who looked up at her with a glimmer of hope. Together, they made their way to the cemetery office. The walls were lined with files, each one a record of someone's final resting place. "Let's ask to see the burial records for this section of the cemetery," Carmen suggested, trying to sound confident for Luz's sake. "Something isn't right, and we're going to get to the bottom of it." At the office, Carmen approached the clerk, a weary-looking man with a deep-set frown that spoke of long hours and countless interactions with grieving families. "Please." Carmen began, her voice firm but laced with urgency. "We need to see the records for the grave registered under Sofia Rivera's name. There may have been a mistake, and we need to clarify this for the sake of a little girl who lost her mother." The clerk, sensing the gravity of the situation, nodded and began to search through the records. He muttered something about it being unusual but assured them he would do his best to find the information they needed. Carmen and Luz sat down, their hands intertwined as they waited. The air in the room was thick with tension, each passing second adding to the weight of their anticipation. Carmen turned to Luz, giving her a reassuring smile despite the turmoil within her. "We'll find out everything, dear," she whispered, her voice gentle and filled with the hope she wished to pass on to the little girl. As the clerk continued his search, Carmen silently vowed that no matter what they uncovered, she would be there for Luz, just as she wished someone had been there for her in her darkest moments. "No matter what it is, we'll face it together," Carmen assured Luz, holding the girl's small hand in hers. Luz nodded, squeezing Carmen's hand as if drawing strength from that promise, finding comfort in the warmth of her touch. The uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on both of them, but at least they weren't alone in their search for answers. After what felt like an eternity, the clerk finally looked up from his computer, his eyes widening slightly with surprise. "There seems to have been an internal notice regarding a mix-up in the marking of several graves from years ago," he said cautiously. "I don't have all the details at the moment, but I promise to conduct a more thorough investigation." A wave of mixed emotions washed over Carmen, relief that they might finally be getting somewhere, but also a deepening sense of apprehension about what they might uncover. "Please do so. We need answers," she insisted, her voice firm, yet tinged with the anxiety that had been building for years. The clerk nodded solemnly, assuring them he would do everything within his power to resolve the matter. As they stepped out of the office, Carmen felt a small glimmer of hope. She knew they were one step closer to unraveling the tangled web of deception and secrets that had inexplicably bound their two families together. But Carmen also realized that this situation required more than just the clerk's efforts. It was time to bring in a professional, someone who could navigate the legal and scientific complexities of the issue. The very next day, Carmen found herself in the office of Dr. Rafael Sandoval, a man whose calm demeanor and thoughtful expression inspired immediate confidence. The walls of his office were lined with books and certificates, reflecting a lifetime of dedication to his profession. "Dr. Sandoval, thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Carmen began, her voice betraying the tension of the past few weeks. "I'm here about a very delicate and personal matter." Dr. Sandoval listened intently, his hands clasped on the desk in front of him. "Please tell me how I can assist you, Mrs. Torres," he said, his tone professional but warm, encouraging her to continue. Taking a deep breath, Carmen gathered her thoughts. "There's been some confusion about a grave in the local cemetery. The grave is supposed to hold my daughter's remains, but now there's suspicion that someone else may be buried there. The words felt heavy on her tongue, laden with the months of uncertainty and pain she had endured. Dr. Sandoval's expression grew more serious as he leaned forward slightly. "I understand. And how do you believe I can help you in this situation?" he asked, his voice steady, inviting her to explain further. "We need a DNA test to confirm the identity of the remains," Carmen explained, the urgency in her voice unmistakable. "I know it's an unusual request, but it's vitally important not just for me, but for a little girl who is also involved in this." She hoped Dr. Sandoval would understand the gravity of the situation. Dr. Sandoval nodded thoughtfully. "Conducting a DNA test on remains is indeed complex, but not impossible. However, we will need legal authorization to proceed. Do you have access to those documents?" he asked, already mentally mapping out the steps they would need to take. "I'll begin handling the paperwork immediately," Carmen responded, her determination clear. "As soon as we have authorization, we can proceed." Dr. Sandoval began jotting down notes in a small, well-worn notebook. "I'll prepare everything on my end so that once we have the necessary permissions, there will be no delays. I understand that this is a matter that needs to be resolved as quickly as possible." Carmen felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you so much, Doctor. Your help means more to me than I can express. With your assistance, I hope we can finally bring peace to everyone involved," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. With a plan in place, Carmen felt as though she was finally taking control of the situation, ready to face whatever truths the upcoming discoveries would bring. Later that evening, Carmen sat quietly on her porch, her gaze drifting over the garden that she and Sofia had once tended together. The sky was awash in the soft hues of sunset, the flowers seeming to drink in the last rays of the day's light. As she waited for the DNA test results, her mind wandered back through the labyrinth of memories she had shared with Sofia. Each recollection now felt tinged with new significance, as though the past was revealing hidden layers she had never noticed before. She vividly recalled one particular afternoon, just a few weeks before Sofia's tragic accident. "Mom, there are things in this world that are necessary, even if they don't seem right," Sofia had remarked with a strange, almost enigmatic tone as she gently patted down the soil around a newly planted flower. At the time, Carmen had dismissed the comment as one of Sofia's many musings, but now those words echoed in her mind, carrying a weight she hadn't recognized before. "What did you mean by that?" "My dear," she murmured to herself, a growing unease gnawing at her. Another detail that now stood out starkly in her memory was the way Sofia had sometimes seemed distant, as though she were burdened by a secret too heavy to share. Carmen could picture one evening at dinner when she had noticed a shadow of worry cross Sofia's face. "Is everything all right, dear?" she had asked, her voice filled with concern. Sofia had smiled, reassuring her mother that everything was fine, but her eyes had told a different story, one of hidden fears and unspoken truths. "I should have pressed for answers," Carmen thought bitterly, chastising herself for her reluctance to dig deeper. The weeks leading up to Sofia's disappearance seemed to replay in Carmen's mind with painful clarity. She remembered how Sofia had started receiving more and more phone calls, often stepping out of the room to answer in hushed tones. Carmen had always respected her daughter's privacy, never questioning the calls or the secrecy that surrounded them. But now, with the clarity of hindsight, she wished she had been more inquisitive, less willing to accept the surface explanations. What had Sofia been hiding? And could it have anything to do with the confusion they now faced? As the evening shadows lengthened, Carmen felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on her. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For Luz, for Jorge, Jorona, and most of all, for Sofia, Carmen vowed to see this through to the end. "Who was on the other end of the line?" "Sofia." "Who took you away from me?" Carmen's voice cracked under the weight of her emotions, each word laced with the agony of a mother's irreplaceable loss. The memories, once fragmented and elusive, now began to coalesce into a clearer, more disturbing picture of Sophia's final days. The conversations, the secrecy, the distant look in her daughter's eyes, all of it now felt like a grim prelude to something far more sinister. A painful suspicion gnawed at Carmen's heart, like pieces of a puzzle slowly falling into place, revealing only fragments of an unbearable truth. Days later, the long-awaited call finally came. The DNA test results were ready. Carmen found herself sitting in Dr. Sandoval's office once more, her body taut with anxiety. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation as she gripped the edge of her chair, her eyes locked onto the envelope in Dr. Sandoval's hands. Every muscle in her body was tense, her breath shallow and quick as if bracing herself for a blow that could shatter her world all over again. Dr. Sandoval's neutral tone barely masked the gravity of what he was about to reveal. "The DNA test results are here," he said, his voice measured, trying to soften the impact of the news. Carmen held her breath, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might burst. "The remains that were tested do not match your daughter Sophia's DNA," he continued, his eyes filled with sympathy as he delivered the devastating news. The room seemed to spin, and for a fleeting moment, Carmen felt as though the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The words echoed in her mind, each one a hammer blow to the fragile hope she had clung to. "No, this can't be," she whispered, her voice barely audible as tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the world around her. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, let alone think. Carmen struggled to comprehend the implications of what she had just heard. "So who is buried under my daughter's tombstone? And where is Sophia?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief, pain, and a desperate need for answers. Each question tore through her, the uncertainty now more agonizing than ever before. Dr. Sandoval handed her a tissue, his expression deeply empathetic. "I'm so sorry, Carmen. I know this only brings more questions and very few answers," he said, his voice gentle yet firm, trying to offer comfort in the face of such a terrible reality. But Carmen was not one to crumble. Despite the tears streaming down her face, her resolve only grew stronger. "I need to understand what happened, doctor," she said, her voice steadier now, fueled by a fierce determination. "I need to know where my daughter is. I need to find her." Her words were laced with the unyielding resolve of a mother who would not rest until she had unearthed the truth, no matter how dark or painful it might be. Dr. Sandoval nodded, recognizing the strength in the woman before him. "I'll help you in any way I can, Carmen. We can start by contacting the local authorities and perhaps even hire a detective. This won't be an easy path, but together we'll do everything we can to find the answers you're seeking," he assured her, his voice filled with a quiet determination of his own. As Carmen left the office, a storm of emotions swirled within her: shock, sorrow, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and possibly more heartache, but she also knew she had no choice but to press on. "For you, Sophia, I'll do anything," she whispered to the sky, her eyes searching the thick clouds, as if hoping to find some semblance of comfort or guidance there. The battle to uncover her daughter's fate had only just begun. The very next day, Carmen walked into the office of Detective Emilio Vega, a man she had met only once before, but whose reputation for solving difficult cases preceded him. Emilio rose to greet her as soon as she stepped through the door, his tall figure exuding confidence and experience. "Mrs. Torres, it's a pleasure to see you again. How can I assist you today?" he asked, his tone polite but tinged with curiosity as he gestured toward the chair in front of his cluttered desk. Carmen took a seat, placing her bag carefully beside her, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for the conversation that was to follow. "Mr. Vega, I come to you with a very serious matter," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. I've discovered that the remains in my daughter Sophia's grave are not hers." The words hung in the air between them, laden with the gravity of her revelation. Detective Vega's expression shifted from polite interest to one of intense focus. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. "That is indeed a serious matter," he responded, his voice measured and professional. "We need to figure out what happened, and more importantly, where your daughter might be." Carmen nodded, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. "I need your help to find out the truth, Mr. Vega. I need to know what happened to Sophia, and I won't stop until I do." Detective Vega gave a solemn nod, already mentally mapping out the steps they would need to take. "You can count on me, Mrs. Torres. We'll start by retracing the events leading up to Sophia's disappearance and examine any connections that could explain this mix-up. It won't be easy, but I promise we will leave no stone unturned." With those words, Carmen felt a faint flicker of hope reignite within her. The road ahead was undoubtedly treacherous, filled with unknowns and possible dangers, but with Detective Vega by her side, she felt just a little less alone in her quest for the truth. As she left his office, Carmen knew that she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to uncover the fate of her beloved daughter, no matter the cost. "I need to find out where my daughter's body is, or if by some miracle she is still alive." Carmen's voice wavered, but the fierce determination behind it was unmistakable. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, and Emilio nodded, his demeanor growing more serious as the gravity of the situation became clear. "This is indeed a serious matter," Carmen Emilio replied, his voice steady, matching the intensity of her resolve. He pulled out a notebook and a pen, ready to capture every detail she could provide. "Do you have any additional information that could help us get started? Any detail, no matter how small, could be crucial." Carmen took a deep breath, her mind racing back to those last, haunting days before Sophia's disappearance. "After the DNA test revealed that the remains weren't Sophia's, I started replaying everything that happened before she vanished," she began, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of the memories. "I remembered strange phone calls, odd behaviors, things that didn't make sense at the time, but now seem like they might be clues to something bigger." She recounted each memory, each detail that now seemed to carry a significance she hadn't recognized before. Emilio listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration as he absorbed every word. Occasionally, he interrupted to ask for clarification, ensuring that no potential lead went unnoticed. "You mentioned phone calls," he said, his tone probing but gentle. "Do you have any idea who might have been on the other end of the line? Are there any records of those calls?" As Carmen shook her head, she could see Emilio already formulating a plan in his mind, laying out the first steps of their investigation. At the end of their conversation, Emilio looked at her with a determined expression, one that filled Carmen with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. "We'll start by tracing those calls and interviewing people who were close to Sophia at the time," he said, his voice resolute. "I'll do everything in my power to find your daughter, Carmen. You're not alone in this." A wave of gratitude and hope washed over Carmen as she heard those words. She knew the path ahead would be filled with challenges and heartache, but Emilio's presence gave her the strength to face whatever came next. With him by her side, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. A few days later, Carmen and Emilio sat together in a small cafe, the table between them covered with notes and photos. The atmosphere was thick with the seriousness of their discussion. Emilio leaned forward, pointing to a photograph of a group of people, some of whom were circled in red. "Carmen, take a look at this," he said, his voice low and serious. "I managed to speak with some of Sophia's former colleagues and discovered that she had become involved with individuals connected to some very risky, possibly dangerous activities. These people here," he continued, pointing to the circled figures, "are known in the local underworld." A chill ran down Carmen's spine as she stared at the faces in the photos. They were strangers to her, yet somehow they were connected to Sofia. "My God, Emilio," she whispered, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and disbelief. "This is much more serious than I ever imagined. How did my daughter get involved with these people?" Her heart raced as she tried to process this new information, her mind swirling with questions and fears. But amid the confusion, a growing resolve took hold. She needed to know more. She needed to understand what had led Sofia down such a perilous path. Emilio met her gaze, his expression filled with the same seriousness. "We're beginning to piece together the puzzle," he said, his voice firm yet understanding. "Carmen, I've also discovered that Sofia had been frequenting places that were far outside her normal routine." He added, unfolding a map and pointing to several marked locations. "These spots are known for their association with illicit activities. It seems she was either trying to infiltrate these circles or was being pressured to participate." Carmen stared at the map, her heart pounding in her chest. Each marked location felt like another piece of the dark puzzle that was Sofia's disappearance. What could have driven her to these places? She wondered aloud, her voice filled with a mix of dread and determination. Was she in trouble? Was someone threatening her? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. But one thing was certain: Carmen was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. No matter where this path led, she knew she had to see it through to the end, for Sofia's sake. She had to know what had happened to her daughter and why she had been drawn into such dangerous company. "Emilio," Carmen said, her voice steadier now, "we need to dig deeper. Whatever Sofia was involved in, it must have been serious for her to get mixed up with these people. We have to find out who they are and what role they played in all of this." Emilio nodded, his expression resolute. "We'll keep digging, Carmen. We'll leave no stone unturned until we find out what happened to Sofia. You have my word on that." With those words, Carmen felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but with Emilio's help, she knew she was on the right path. She would find out the truth, no matter the cost. For Sofia and herself, she had to know what had led her daughter into this web of secrets and lies, and where that path had ultimately taken her. Carmen absorbed every detail, every name, every location, etching it all into her memory. She knew that each piece of information could be a crucial link to uncovering the truth about her daughter. "We need to go to these places, Emilio," she insisted, her voice resolute. "We need to talk to more people. If Sofia was involved with these kinds of people, it might be dangerous, but it could also be the key to finding out where she is now." Emilio nodded, his concern evident, but his determination just as strong. "I agree, Carmen. I'll make the arrangements for us to visit those places safely. I'll reach out to some contacts who can provide cover or additional information. But I need you to stay safe. I don't want you exposing yourself to unnecessary risks." Carmen met Emilio's gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I'll do whatever it takes, Emilio. Nothing will stop me from discovering the truth about my daughter. Whatever God wills, I need to know what happened to Sofia, and I'll go to the ends of the earth if necessary." Her words were charged with the strength of a mother's love, a force that knew no bounds. Emilio, recognizing that fire in her eyes, knew that they would face whatever came their way together, no matter the cost. As they drove through the lesser-known streets of Monterrey, Carmen gazed out the window, taking in the sights of a city she thought she knew well. But these were areas she had only passed by a few times, never venturing in, never imagining what lay within. Emilio drove cautiously, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, always on alert. The streets seemed to grow darker, the atmosphere heavier with each turn. "These places we're visiting," Emilio began, his voice low and serious, "are known hideouts for illicit activities. We need to be extremely careful here." Carmen continued to watch the city pass by, the worn facades of buildings and shadowy alleys painting a picture of a world she had never been a part of. I never imagined Monterey had these. These places, she murmured, her voice reflecting the tension she felt. How could Sofia get involved in this? What was she thinking? Emilio glanced at her, his expression sympathetic. Sometimes people are drawn into these situations without fully understanding the danger until it's too late, he explained, slowing the car as they approached an old, decrepit warehouse. We'll start here. I've heard this place could be a meeting point for some of Sofia's contacts. Carmen felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the rundown building. It was hard to reconcile the vibrant, creative daughter she knew with the world they were now stepping into. But Carmen knew she couldn't turn back. If this was where the answers lay, then she would confront whatever darkness awaited her. As they parked the car and prepared to enter the warehouse, Carmen took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Let's do this, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. Emilio nodded, leading the way with the cautious confidence of someone who had been in similar situations before. Together they stepped out of the car and into the unknown, ready to face the shadows of Monterey's underworld in their quest to find Sofia. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Carmen's determination fueled every step she took. She knew she would find the truth, no matter what it cost her. As they stepped out of the car and moved toward the warehouse, Carmen felt her heart pound harder with each step. The area was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound, a distant drip of water, the crunch of gravel underfoot. Emilio raised a finger to his lips, signaling Carmen to stay silent. Together they moved carefully, staying within the shadows cast by the surrounding buildings. When they reached the warehouse, they crouched low, peering through the grimy windows, straining to see inside. Through the dirt-streaked glass, they could make out several figures huddled around a table, their voices low and their movements deliberate. The atmosphere inside seemed tense, as if they were discussing something of great importance. Emilio quickly pulled Carmen back, ensuring they remained out of sight. Those must be some of the contacts, he whispered, his voice barely audible. We can't confront them directly, it's too dangerous. I'll take some pictures and try to identify them later. He carefully retrieved a small camera from his jacket, his movements practiced and efficient. Carmen, still hidden in the shadows, felt a storm of emotions: fear, anxiety, but most of all, an unshakable determination. We have to continue. Emilio, she whispered fiercely. No matter how scared I am, I need to know the truth. Sofia is my daughter, and I would do anything for her. Her words were filled with a raw intensity that seemed to strengthen Emilio's resolve. He nodded, fully grasping the depth of her commitment. After capturing several discreet photos, Emilio signaled for them to retreat. Together, they carefully made their way back to the car, each step measured and cautious. Once inside, they quickly drove away, the warehouse disappearing into the distance behind them. With every location they visited, they felt they were getting closer to the truth, each clue, each shadowy figure bringing them one step closer to unraveling the mystery surrounding Sofia. Later that evening, Emilio sat in his office, the dim light casting long shadows across the room as he meticulously reviewed the photos he had taken at the warehouse. His focus was intense, searching for any detail that might provide a lead. As he flipped through the images, his phone suddenly rang, the screen displaying an unknown number. A sense of unease gripped him, but he answered nonetheless, bringing the phone cautiously to his ear. Hello, his voice was measured, tinged with wariness, ready for anything. On the other end, a distorted voice spoke, its tone cold and devoid of emotion. You're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Stop this investigation now. A chill ran down Emilio's spine, but he kept his voice steady, masking the anxiety that crept up his throat. Who is this? Why do you want me to stop? His mind raced, already analyzing the situation, searching for any clues in the voice or the context of the call. There was a brief, unsettling silence before the voice responded, this time dripping with menace. "It's none of your business who we are, but if you continue, the consequences will be severe with that." The call abruptly ended, the ominous words lingering in the air like a dark cloud. Emilio remained still for a moment, the phone still in his hand, his heartbeat quickening in response to the threat. The warning was clear, but so was his resolve. He knew this was a turning point, a signal that they were getting close to something significant, something dangerous. The risk was real, but so was the importance of finding out the truth. Emilio placed the phone down with a determined expression, his thoughts immediately turning to Carmen and the perilous path they were on. He knew he had to warn her, to prepare her for the dangers that lay ahead. But he also knew that nothing would deter her from finding her daughter, not threats, not fear, nothing. And so, he steeled himself for the fight that was sure to come, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in their quest for the truth about Sofia. Despite the fear that gnawed at him, Emilio knew there was no turning back now. The stakes were too high, and the truth was within their reach. He thought of Carmen, her unwavering determination, her willingness to face any danger for the sake of her daughter. He couldn't abandon her, not now, not when they were so close. "They're trying to intimidate us," Emilio murmured to himself, feeling a surge of anger and resolve. But that only proves we're on the right track. Something big is being hidden, and they're desperate to keep it buried. With a sense of urgency, Emilio decided to call Carmen. She needed to know about the threat, but more importantly, they needed to be on the same page about how to proceed. As the phone rang, he braced himself, hoping that the news wouldn't shake her resolve. "Carmen," he said when she answered, his voice steady but serious. "I received a threatening call. They told me to stop the investigation. I just wanted you to know." There was a brief pause on the other end, but when Carmen spoke, her voice was filled with a courage that only strengthened Emilio's resolve. "Emilio, this is horrible, but we can't let them intimidate us. We have to continue. If they're trying to scare us, it means we're getting close to the truth. Are you okay?" Her concern was genuine, but her determination was unmistakable. "I'm fine, Carmen." "And you're right," Emilio replied, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "We'll continue, but with more caution. We can't afford to make any mistakes now, but we're not going to stop." They agreed to take additional security measures, understanding that from this point on, every move would need to be calculated, every step taken with both courage and cunning. "Nothing will stop us," Carmen, Emilio said, his voice firm. "We're going to find out the truth, no matter what it takes." In the days that followed, Emilio's investigation intensified. Every lead was pursued with relentless focus, every clue scrutinized for its potential connection to Sofia's disappearance. And now, he and Carmen found themselves parked discreetly at a distance from an old, decommissioned factory on the outskirts of Monterrey. The building was dilapidated, its walls scarred by years of neglect, but its ominous presence hinted at the secrets it might hold. "This is the place," Carmen, Emilio said, lowering his binoculars after scanning the area. "My contact mentioned that this factory has been used for meetings that aren't exactly legal." Sofia's name came up several times during one of these conversations. Carmen peered through the windshield at the looming structure, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The factory was a stark reminder of how far from her daughter's world she had ventured. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "We need to be careful," Emilio cautioned, his gaze still fixed on the factory. "We don't know who's inside or what we're walking into. We'll observe from here for a while and see if anyone comes or goes. If it's safe, we'll get closer and see what we can find out." Carmen nodded, her resolve as firm as ever. "Whatever we find, I'm ready. We have to know what happened to Sofia." As they sat in the car, waiting and watching, the tension between them was palpable. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, the silence heavy with the weight of their mission. Emilio kept his eyes trained on the factory, looking for any sign of movement, while Carmen silently steeled herself for whatever lay ahead. Finally, after what seemed like hours, a shadowy figure emerged from the factory's side entrance, glancing around before slipping into a car parked nearby. Emilio quickly raised his binoculars again, trying to get a better look. "Someone's leaving," he whispered. "We need to follow them, but we have to be careful not to be seen." Carmen's heart raced as Emilio started the car, pulling out slowly to maintain a safe distance. The vehicle ahead moved cautiously through the deserted streets as if its driver was aware of the need for discretion. "This could lead us to more answers," Emilio murmured, his focus unwavering as he navigated through the darkened streets. As they followed the car into the night, both Carmen and Emilio knew that the road ahead was fraught with danger. But they were united in their purpose, driven by a shared determination to uncover the truth, no matter how perilous the journey. They had come too far to turn back now, and nothing, no threat, no fear would stand in their way. Carmen's heart pounded in her chest, a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation swirling within her. "Do you think she might be here now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she strained to peer through the dirty car window without drawing attention. "I don't know," Emilio replied, his voice low and laced with determination. "But something big is happening here, and we have to find out what it is." He put away the binoculars, checking that his gun was securely under his coat. "We'll wait until it gets a little darker. Going in now would be too risky." Carmen nodded, understanding that patience and caution were their greatest allies at that moment. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity as they waited for the cover of darkness. Finally, as daylight began to fade, the building was engulfed in shadows, making the setting even more ominous. Emilio checked his watch, then glanced at Carmen. "It's time. We need to be quick and silent. Are you ready?" Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Carmen nodded. "I'm ready. Let's find my daughter." With cautious, measured steps, they approached the building. The door was ajar, creaking slightly as it swayed in the evening breeze, as if someone had left in haste and neglected to secure it. Emilio entered first, his senses on high alert, with Carmen following closely behind. The interior was dark. The only sounds were the distant drip of water and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the shadows. They moved carefully through the building, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. Signs of recent activity were scattered around still warm cigarette butts, discarded food cans, and then, most strikingly, a woman's coat draped over a chair. Carmen's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the coat immediately. "This is Sophia's coat," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "She was here." Emilia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're close, Carmen. We're going to find out what happened," he promised, his voice steady and supportive. Together, they pressed on, navigating through the darkened corridors of the factory, their senses heightened with hope and caution. As they moved deeper into the building, they heard the faint murmur of voices coming from a lit room ahead. Emilio signaled for Carmen to stay silent, and they approached the partially open door with stealth and care. Hidden from view, they peered into the room. There, with her back turned, was a woman speaking to someone just out of their line of sight. Carmen's breath hitched as she watched the woman, her heart racing faster than ever. "Sophia," she whispered to herself, her voice thick with emotion. The posture, the way the woman moved, Carmen recognized it all. It was her daughter. Overcome with emotion and unable to contain herself, Carmen stepped forward, her instinct to reunite with her daughter overpowering her caution. "Sophia," she called out, her voice echoing louder than she had intended. The woman turned sharply, and the room seemed to freeze in that instant. Carmen's heart skipped a beat as she locked eyes with the woman she had been searching for, her daughter, Sophia. There was a moment of shock and disbelief on Sophia's face, followed by a flash of recognition. Carmen and Emilio hissed, realizing the danger they might have just walked into, but it was too late to pull her back. The other person in the room stepped forward, revealing themselves, and the tension in the air thickened. Sophia's eyes widened in a mix of fear and confusion. "Mom," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of relief and panic, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Emilio moved quickly, stepping into the room with Carmen, his hand subtly resting near his coat where his gun was hidden. "Sophia," he said calmly, trying to gauge the situation, "we're here to help you. What's going on?" But before Sophia could respond, the person she had been speaking to, an imposing figure with a stern expression, moved closer, their presence radiating menace. "What's this?" the stranger demanded, their voice cold and commanding. "You weren't supposed to bring anyone here." Sophia glanced between her mother, Emilio, and the stranger, her face pale as the gravity of the situation set in. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. "They must have followed me." Carmen, her motherly instinct taking over, stepped closer to Sophia, her voice firm but gentle. "We're here to take you home, Sophia. Whatever this is, we can fix it together." The stranger laughed, a dark, unsettling sound. "It's not that simple," they said, eyes narrowing as they sized up the intruders. "You've just walked into something much bigger than you can handle." Emilio, sensing the danger escalating, tightened his grip on Carmen's arm. "We need to leave now," he whispered urgently. "This isn't safe." But Sophia, seeing the resolve in her mother's eyes, knew that they couldn't just walk away, not without confronting whatever it was that had drawn her into this world. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Carmen's heart broke at the sight of her daughter's tears, but she knew they had to act quickly. "It's okay, Sophia. We'll get through this together." At that moment, Emilio made a decision. "We're leaving," he said firmly, stepping forward to take control of the situation. Now he moved to guide both Carmen and Sophia towards the door, ready to protect them at all costs. The stranger, sensing the power shift, stepped back, letting them pass but not without a final warning. "You're making a mistake," they hissed. "This isn't over." But Emilio, Carmen, and Sophia kept moving, their focus solely on getting out of the building safely. As they hurried out into the night, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on them, but they knew one thing for certain: they were together, and they would face whatever came next as a family. Once outside, with the cool night air filling their lungs, Carmen turned to Sophia, her voice filled with both relief and determination. "We're not letting you go again, Sophia. We'll figure this out together." Sophia nodded, tears still streaming down her face, but for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I don't want to run anymore, Mom." Emilio, ever vigilant, kept watch as they made their way to the car, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. But for now, they had each other, and that was all the strength they needed to face the unknown. The woman turned abruptly, alarm flashing across her face. "Who are you? How do you know that name?" she demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion as she tried to identify who had called out to her. Carmen halted, overcome by a wave of emotion at the sight of the woman who, despite the passage of time and the weight of circumstances, was unmistakably her daughter. "It's me, Carmen, your mother," she said softly, taking a tentative step forward with her hands extended in a gesture of peace. "Please, Sophia, I know it's you. We've been looking for you for so long." Tears welled up in Carmen's eyes, her voice trembling with the weight of every word. For a moment, Sophia hesitated, her eyes searching Carmen's face with a mixture of confusion, recognition, and something that resembled fear. "Mom," she finally murmured, the defensiveness in her gaze starting to wane as recognition and memories began to take hold. But almost immediately, fear clouded her eyes again. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling as she looked around nervously. "It's too dangerous. You need to go. I can't risk anything happening to you." Carmen, resolute and unyielding, moved closer to Sophia, gently taking her hands into her own. "I'm not going anywhere, Sophia," she said, her voice steady with the certainty of a mother's love. "I won't let you face this alone. Wherever you are, that's where I need to be too. We're in this together, no matter what." Sophia tried to pull away, the concern for her mother's safety evident in her expression. "Mom, please. I don't want you to get hurt because of me," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Carmen held Sophia's hands tighter, locking eyes with her daughter, pouring all her love and determination into that gaze. "There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be than by your side," she said softly, yet firmly. "Nothing will tear me away from you, my daughter. We're going to resolve this together." Seeing the unwavering resolve in her mother's eyes, Sophia knew that arguing would be useless. With tears brimming in her eyes, she slowly nodded, her voice barely a whisper, as she confessed, "I had to do it. I had to disappear. It was the only way to protect us all." Carmen's heart ached at the pain and regret in Sophia's voice. She stepped forward and enveloped her daughter in a tight embrace, holding her as if to shield her from the world. "None of that matters now," Carmen whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What matters is that you're alive, and we can help you. We can protect you." Emilio, who had been standing guard, remained alert to any potential threats, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of relief at the sight of Carmen and Sophia reunited. He knew they still faced dangers, but this moment of peace was a small victory in their tumultuous journey. Later, in a discreet corner of the same abandoned building, Carmen and Sophia sat down to talk. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and long-held secrets. Sophia, her face showing signs of exhaustion and worry, began to speak. "Mom, when I got involved with these people, I didn't realize how deep I'd get. It started with small favors, things that seemed harmless at first. But then I found out I was in way over my head, tangled up in something much bigger and more dangerous than I could have ever imagined." Carmen listened, her heart tightening with every word Sophia spoke. "They started threatening my friends, our family," Sophia continued, her voice shaking with the memory. "I was scared, Mom. They told me the only way to keep everyone safe was if I disappeared. So, we planned my fake death." She paused, swallowing hard as tears threatened to spill over. "I didn't know what else to do. I went far away and changed my identity, all to protect the people I love. I wanted to tell the truth, but every move I made was watched. It's only recently that I managed to get a little freedom, but even so, it's not a real life." Sophia sighed deeply, the weight of her situation pulling her down. "I've been living in constant fear, unable to truly live," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, filled with pain and resignation. Carmen, her own hands trembling, reached out to take Sophia's hands in hers once more. "Sophia, dear, what you've been through. I can't even begin to imagine the fear and isolation you felt," Carmen said, her voice cracking under the strain of her emotions. "But now that we know the truth, we can help you. We'll find a way to end this, to bring you back home where you belong." Her voice, though thick with emotion, was firm and unwavering, trying to instill some hope in the desperate situation. Carmen's eyes met Sophia's, and in that moment, a silent promise passed between them, a vow to fight through whatever lay ahead together. "I'm so tired, Mom. Tired of hiding, of living in fear," Sophia confessed, her voice trembling with exhaustion and despair. "I just want to come home, but I'm terrified of what might happen if I do. The consequences for all of us could be unbearable." Her eyes searched Carmen's face, desperate for comfort, for some assurance that everything would be okay. Carmen's heart ached as she listened to her daughter's words, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her. "Sophia, what you did was incredibly risky, and it hurts me that I didn't know anything," Carmen replied, her voice tinged with both pain and determination. "But we can't dwell on the past right now. We need to focus on what to do next to resolve your situation." Sophia looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling as she struggled to face the reality of her choices. "I know, Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the room. "I'm so sorry for everything. I thought I was protecting our family, but I see now that I only caused more harm." Carmen reached out and took Sophia's hands in hers, offering her a reassuring squeeze. "We're going to need a lawyer, someone who can help us navigate the legal complexities of your return," she said, already planning the next steps in her mind. "And we'll need to talk to the police. Explain everything why you faked your death and what led you to that decision." The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but Carmen knew that they couldn't afford to wait any longer. "I'll be by your side, Sophia, no matter what happens. We're not going to let you face this alone." Carmen's voice was firm, filled with the unwavering support only a mother could provide. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, overwhelmed by the love and forgiveness she didn't feel she deserved. "Thank you, Mom," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I deserve all this after everything I've caused, but I'm so grateful to have you here." Carmen's grip on Sophia's hands tightened as she spoke with conviction. "You're my daughter, and nothing in this world can change that. Together we're going to fix this. It will take time, and it won't be easy, but we're strong. We've always been strong." The bond between them, once frayed by fear and uncertainty, began to mend as they sat there, united in their resolve to rebuild their lives. The road ahead was daunting, but they had each other, and that was all they needed to face whatever came next. Carmen took Sophia home that night, the first step in a long journey toward healing and redemption. The house, once filled with memories of a happier time, now became a sanctuary where they could start to piece together the fragments of their shattered lives. One day, as Carmen was settling into the quiet of her home, the phone rang. She hesitated before answering, a wave of anxiety washing over her as she reached for the receiver. "Hello," she said, her voice unsteady, betraying the fear that had taken root in her heart. On the other end of the line, a distorted voice crackled through the receiver, cold and menacing. "You and your detective are getting involved where you shouldn't," the voice warned, the threat clear and unmistakable. "Stop this, or the consequences will be severe." Carmen's heart pounded in her chest, fear gripping her tightly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "I don't know what you're talking about. We're just trying to help my daughter," she replied, her words shaky but defiant. The voice on the other end remained calm, but its tone was filled with malice. "Listen carefully. We're not playing around. This is bigger than you think. If you continue, we can't guarantee your safety or that of those you love." With that, the line went dead, leaving Carmen frozen in place, the phone still clutched in her hand. Her mind raced as she tried to process what had just happened, the words of the threat echoing in her ears. She knew now that whoever was behind this was watching her, monitoring her every move. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, paralyzing her with fear. But even in the face of this terror, Carmen knew she couldn't back down. Her daughter's life, and the lives of those she loved, were at stake. Slowly, she placed the phone back on the receiver, her hands trembling. She knew she had to be strong, for Sophia, for her family. They had come too far to give up now. Carmen sat down, trying to calm her racing heart. She knew the threat was real, but so was her determination. She would protect her family, no matter the cost. She would face whatever dangers lay ahead, because there was no other choice. When Emilio arrived later that evening, Carmen's worry was etched deeply into her face as she recounted the threatening call. "Emilio, they threatened me. I'm scared of what they might do. Maybe we should stop this," she suggested, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Emilio listened closely, his expression serious as he weighed the situation. "Carmen, I completely understand your fear. It's valid, and it's natural to feel this way," he began, his voice calm but firm. But if we stop now, these people will continue to go unpunished. They'll keep doing this to others, and there will be no justice for Sophia. We need to be cautious, of course, but we also need to see this through. I'm here with you, and we'll make sure everything is done as safely as possible." His determination provided a small but steady comfort to Carmen, who nodded slowly. She knew that despite the danger, the truth about Sophia needed to come to light. In the days following the phone threat, Carmen and Emilio intensified their precautions. They met in a quiet corner of a local cafe, choosing a secluded spot where they could discuss their next steps without drawing attention. "We need to be more strategic," Emilio said, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I'm going to contact some of my colleagues to reinforce our security. We should also install surveillance systems at your house." Carmen nodded in agreement, though her concern was still palpable. "I trust you, Emilio. I just don't want to put anyone else in danger. It's bad enough that I'm involved in this," she said, the worry in her voice evident, each line on her face revealing the weight of the fear and responsibility she felt for those around her. "I understand," Carmen Emilio replied, his voice reassuring, "but I won't let anything happen to you. We're going to find those responsible and make sure they pay for what they've done." His words were filled with conviction, providing Carmen with the confidence she desperately needed. Taking out his phone, Emilio dialed a number. After a brief exchange, he began speaking in a low voice, describing the situation and requesting help. When he hung up, he turned to Carmen with a more relaxed expression. "My colleagues will start making night rounds near your house. Also, a friend who specializes in security technology will install cameras and alarms tomorrow." Carmen felt a wave of relief wash over her, grateful to know she wasn't alone in this fight. "Thank you, Emilio. I don't know what I would do without your help," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she briefly held his hands in a gesture of gratitude and companionship. In the days that followed, with the new security measures in place, Carmen and Emilio pressed on with their investigation, their determination renewed. Every step was taken with caution, but they never wavered in their resolve to uncover the truth and bring those responsible to justice. Weeks of intensive investigation and many sleepless nights finally paid off. Carmen and Emilio managed to gather enough evidence to build a solid case against the gang involved in Sophia's forged disappearance and the threats that followed. They had collected documents, audio recordings, and videos that not only linked the gang members to various criminal activities, but also directly implicated them in Sophia's case. Cautiously, Emilio reached out to a special police unit that specialized in organized crime and corruption. They arranged a meeting in a secure location, far from prying eyes and potential threats. During the meeting, Emilio and Carmen presented all the material they had collected, carefully explaining each piece of evidence and how it connected the criminals to Sophia's ordeal. The officers of the specialized unit were impressed by the depth and thoroughness of the investigation conducted by Emilio and Carmen. Recognizing the significance of the evidence, they moved quickly to launch an operation to apprehend those involved. With the help of a tactical team, the police executed a series of coordinated raids on various hideouts used by the gang. The operation was a resounding success. Several gang members were arrested, including key leaders who were caught completely off guard, with no time to destroy additional evidence. The authorities also seized a significant amount of documents and electronic materials that further strengthened the case against the gang. As the dust settled, Carmen felt a sense of relief that she hadn't known in a long time. The fear that had gripped her so tightly was beginning to ease, replaced by a cautious optimism. Sophia was safe, the people who had caused so much pain were in custody, and justice was finally within reach. Emilio, ever vigilant, remained by Carmen's side throughout the process, ensuring that every loose end was tied up and that Sophia and Carmen were protected. The road to recovery and healing would be long, But for the first time in a while, there was hope that they could rebuild their lives, free from the shadows that had haunted them for so long. Carmen was present when the news of the arrests was confirmed, and a profound sense of relief washed over her. The struggle, the risks, the fear, it had all led to this moment of vindication. Justice had finally been served. Tears of gratitude filled her eyes as she turned to Emilio. "We did it, Emilio. Justice has finally been served," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Emilio, standing beside her, shared a sense of accomplishment. "You've been incredible throughout this process, Carmen. Your courage and determination were essential to getting us here," he replied, his voice filled with admiration. Together, they attended the start of the judicial process against the criminals, feeling a deep satisfaction for having played a role in making the streets a little safer and honoring Sofia's struggle to protect her family. On a quiet afternoon, after the successful conclusion of the arrests, Sofia, Carmen, and Emilio met at a small cafe to celebrate their victory. The cafe was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to the cold, tense days they had endured. As they sat together, Sofia reached across the table, taking both Carmen's and Emilio's hands in hers. She looked into their eyes, her brimming with gratitude. "You know, I never thought we'd get this far," Sofia began, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom, Emilio, I owe my life to both of you. Without your courage and determination, I don't know if I would have had the strength to face all of this." Carmen smiled at her daughter, squeezing her hand affectionately. "Sofia, you're my daughter, and there's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for you. Seeing you safe and knowing that justice has been served is all I could ever ask for." Emilio, equally moved, added, "It's been a difficult journey, Sofia, but you showed incredible strength throughout this process. Helping you and your mother was something I did with all my heart. I'm just relieved that it all ended well." Tears glistened in Sofia's eyes as she looked at them both. "You didn't just fight for me, you gave me the chance to start over. All I want now is to live a life that makes all this effort worthwhile. Thank you for believing in me, even when things seemed so bleak." Carmen and Emilio exchanged a glance, their hearts full. "There's no need to thank us, Sofia. We're a family, and families stand by each other," Carmen said, her voice warm with love. Emilio nodded in agreement. "Exactly," he said with a smile. "And now we're going to move forward together." Those moments of recognition and gratitude solidified the bond between them, sealing a mutual commitment to support each other, no matter what the future holds. Days later, back at the cemetery where it all began, Carmen and Sofia walked side by side through the rows of graves to the place that had been the center of so much pain and mystery. The day was overcast, the sky a blanket of gray, with a gentle breeze stirring the leaves of the trees, creating a serene, almost reverent silence. They approached the tombstone that still bore Sofia's name, the marker of a life that had been hidden away under the weight of fear and deception. Carmen held a new plaque in her hands, one that would reveal and honor the name of the real person buried there. She turned to Sofia, her eyes soft but determined. "We're here to do what's right, Sofia. It's time to correct the mistakes of the past," she said, her voice steady but laden with emotion. Sofia nodded, the significance of the moment not lost on her. Together, they gently removed the old tombstone and replaced it with the new one, the name on the plaque a testament to truth and respect. As they stepped back, Carmen took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure beginning to take root in her heart. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but standing here, with her daughter by her side, she knew that they had not only uncovered the truth, but had also restored dignity to a life that had been overshadowed by lies. Sofia slipped her arm through her mother's, leaning into her for support. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for everything." Carmen smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "We did this together, Sofia, and now we can finally start to heal." The two of them stood there for a while, the cool breeze carrying away the remnants of their pain as they prepared to step into the future. leaving the shadows of the past behind. They walked away from the cemetery, ready to embrace the new chapter in their lives, one built on truth, love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. "I never imagined things would end this way," Sophia said softly, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and lingering sorrow. "Mom, it's strange to be here, not as the person buried, but as someone who still has the chance to fix things." As they worked together to install the new tombstone, it felt like a physical and metaphorical reconstruction of their lives, righting wrongs, mending what had been broken. "Your name will now be remembered as it should be, and the person resting here can finally have peace," Carmen said as they stepped back to admire their work. The new tombstone now bore the name Ana Martinez, honoring the true identity of the woman who had been mistakenly hidden behind Sophia's name. Sophia knelt to place fresh flowers at the base of the stone, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry for everything, Ana," she whispered, "and thank you, Mom, for being by my side, even when I didn't deserve it." She looked up at Carmen, her eyes filled with both gratitude and remorse. Carmen pulled her into a warm embrace. "We'll get through this together. The important thing is that you're here now, and we're correcting the mistakes. That's what family does, they support each other, no matter what." As they walked away from the grave, they left behind not just the revealed truth, but a chapter of their lives they were ready to close. Together they faced the future stronger and more united than ever before. In the days and weeks that followed, as the investigation wound down and life began to return to a new sense of normalcy, a new bond began to form between Jorge and Sophia. Their shared experiences and the mutual support they had provided each other began to blossom into something deeper. One afternoon, after a long session of reviewing documents and planning the final stages of the investigation, Jorge and Sophia found themselves alone, sitting in a small cafe near Emilio's office, sipping coffee and unwinding from the day's work. Jorge glanced at Sophia, noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the progress they had made. "Sophia, I've always known you were incredibly strong and determined," he said, admiration clear in his voice. "Seeing you fight so passionately for your family only makes me respect you more." Sophia smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, Jorge. This journey has been tough, but knowing I'm not alone makes all the difference. Your support, along with Carmen's and Luz's, has given me the strength to keep going." As their encounters grew more frequent, the respect and admiration between Jorge and Sophia deepened into something more. Their conversations became longer, their shared moments more intimate, and soon feelings began to surface that neither could ignore. One afternoon, while walking through a peaceful park, Jorge gathered his courage. He stopped and turned to Sophia, his heart pounding. "Sophia, I've started to feel something more for you," he confessed, his voice filled with vulnerability. "Over these past months, you've become a very important part of my life." Sophia paused, looking at Jorge with a blend of surprise and joy. "I feel the same way, Jorge," she admitted, relief evident in her voice. "I was afraid to say anything, not wanting to complicate things, but I'm so happy that you feel the same." With the mystery of the tombstones finally resolved and the truth bringing peace to their lives, Jorge and Sophia decided to embrace their feelings and move forward in their relationship. What had started as a connection born out of adversity had grown into a bond of mutual respect, love, and hope for the future. They found comfort in each other, knowing that their hearts, tested and tempered by the trials they had faced, were now united in the promise of a shared journey ahead. Luz and Carmen, seeing the happiness blossoming between Jorge and Sophia, were overjoyed. They gave their full support, grateful that after such a long period of darkness and uncertainty, joy was once again finding its way into their lives. On a sunny afternoon, the three generations, Carmen, Sophia, and Luz, gathered at the local park, a place that had come to symbolize a new beginning for them. Carmen sat on a bench, basking in the warm sunlight, as she watched Sophia and Luz playfully kicking a soccer ball back and forth on the grass. "It's so good to see them like this together," Carmen said, turning to Sophia as she sat down beside her to rest. "It feels like we can finally breathe again, like we've truly left the past behind." Sophia smiled, her eyes following Luz as she ran around, her laughter filling the air. "Mom, I never would have made it through all of this without you and Luz. She's been such a light for us. In many ways, she's like the daughter I never had." Sophia's words were filled with sincerity, and Carmen saw a glow in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a lightness that spoke of healing. Luz came running towards them, her face beaming with excitement, and she jumped into Carmen's arms, giggling. "Grandma, are you coming to play with us?" Her youthful energy was infectious, and Carmen couldn't help but smile. "Of course, dear. Let's see if I still remember how to play soccer," Carmen said with a laugh, getting up and following Luz back to the field. As she ran after the ball, a feeling of pure joy washed over her, a joy she hadn't felt in a long time. Sophia stood back for a moment, watching her mother and Luz play. Her heart swelled with gratitude, a deep sense of peace settling in. "You know, Mom, I think we finally learned what matters. No matter what happened, we're together now, and that's what counts." With that, she joined them, playfully kicking the ball back to Luz, who shrieked with delight. The sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park as they played until they were all tired and happy. As they walked home, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange, they held hands, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. Carmen looked at Sophia and Luz, her heart overflowing with love and a fierce sense of protection for both of them. "We're in this together," she said softly, squeezing their hands. The simple phrase carried the weight of all they had endured and the promise of all that was yet to come. Together they continued down the path of reconstruction, stronger and more united than ever, ready to face whatever the future held. The darkness of the past had given way to a future filled with hope, love, and the unshakable strength of a family that had survived it all. And that brings us to the end of this powerful journey, a story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. We've witnessed how, despite the darkest of times, hope can be rekindled, and how, with courage and determination, we can overcome even the greatest of challenges. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? Please comment below with one thing that resonated with you, something you'll take with you and apply in your own life. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to bring you inspiring stories like this one. Thank you for watching.